You may not have heard of Clark Olofsson, but you've probably heard of Stockholm-syndrome, an expression that was coined after the actions of this criminal in Sweden in the 1970s. We're heading to Netflix for Clark.
Mitt namn är Olofsson, Clark Olofsson. Och nu jävlar ska ni få höra min story. Du har säkert hört talas om mig. Bankrånare på världskändis över hela världen. Jag blev Stockholm-syndrommannen med hela världen. Men fan, det borde heta Clark Olofsson-syndromet.
This is the story of Clark Olofsson, a Swedish criminal who made headlines throughout Scandinavia and the world because of his audacious activities and his escapes from different institutions. He's probably best known to many people for a 1973 bank robbery where hostages were taken for a period of days, and those hostages were treated apparently so well and there was so much kindness shown towards them that at the end of it some of them defended him against those who were trying to save them. That is where the phrase Stockholm Syndrome was coined, and that is of course a phrase that we still use today. However, this drama is all about the life of this man and not just that one incident. So we start at the very beginning. And when I say the very beginning, I mean the very beginning, because the first time we meet Clark, he's actually still inside his mother's womb. And as he explains, he doesn't like being told what to do, and that's why he's not coming out. And so we have very quickly established not only a very quirky way of storytelling, which this show certainly does take you on a journey of, but also we establish a personality that is incredibly strong and one that throughout this series we will see start to develop. Now, this whole story is told from the perspective of Clark himself. He is the narrator, and I think that's always a really nice thing to be able to do when you're making a anti-hero criminal story, because you get to see a little bit more about the motivations. You get to also hear the justification sometimes of why people think that what they're doing is the right thing to do. Now, he's played by Bill Skarsgård in this with real aplomb. It's a fantastic performance and a great narration throughout, which you really want to have in the original Swedish with subtitles. There are dubbed versions available, but I'd recommend that you go with the original subtitles to really get the essence of the performance coming through. Now, we learn through this narration and through seeing things that go on about his childhood early on, about the violence that goes on between his parents, but then also his quite quick move into petty crime and then more serious crime as he gets older, stuff that will land him up in problems with the police, in juvenile detention centres, and he will have a fairly rough start to life. But this is something that also seems to solidify an attitude in him that he wants to go out and get what he can from life. And he has a phrase, if you can't be the best of the best, at least be the best of the worst. And that's something that really hits home very quickly in this series.
Kan vi inte prata lite om din pappa? För det känns som att du är rädd att bli som honom.
Vad fan, du vet ju, det här jävla samhället, de har aldrig gett mig en ärlig chans.
Jag vet.
Jävla skiten.
Du har så mycket att ge. Du skulle kunna bli en förebild.
Now, there's some great scenes at the beginning of the show that really kind of set up the premise for what Clark's about and how he is so sure of himself. One time that really comes to mind is when him and his friends break into the summer house of the Prime Minister of Sweden himself, and he ends up held at gunpoint by said Prime Minister, and he at no point seems to flinch. He just tells the Prime Minister that one day he'll regret the fact that he didn't know who he was and not the other way round, which is kind of a great example and a great summary of how Clark obviously felt about himself and how he would continue to feel about himself as he went on into his criminal enterprises. Things get very serious very quickly for Clark when he and his friend Gunnar are involved in a stop by the police, and Gunnar, who is panicking about the situation, ends up shooting one of the policemen and killing them. That means that they are now officially on the run and there's no way back from this life that he is living. He has to just keep going and he has to turn things up to the next level. Now, we are also introduced to a love story, one that doesn't necessarily play out in the most conventional way, because the first time we meet the character, she is with her mother and he is telling a lot of lies to both of them and ends up having different encounters with both of those people. But as time goes on, him and Madhu will develop a continued relationship and she will stand by him even though things are looking like they're going wrong. Now, this is just simply a very, very good piece of television. It's obviously a story that you can't take your eyes off, because this is someone who just doesn't seem to want to say no and has such confidence in themselves and their belief that they can get what they want by doing whatever they want, that you just can't stop seeing what's going to happen next. At times it feels quite unbelievable, and this careful line has to be trodden by the program makers, and it's written and produced by Jonas Ackerlund, and he's done a really good job here of making sure that this anti-hero character doesn't become too much of a kind of celebrity in the minds of the viewers. Yes, there are very endearing qualities, and yes, of course, at times you do find yourself rooting for anti-heroes in situations, but also there are enough reminders in this that this is someone who has done things that are wrong, is doing things that are hurting people and doing things that are bad. So you do also have that tempered side of the story, and I think that's done really, really well here, which sometimes it isn't in shows of this type. This is a quirky, a funny, a very, very exciting and dramatic story which you really want in your life. It's something that you may know a little bit about, but once you start to get under the skin of Clark and you start to hear more about the exploits that happened in his life, you will be gripped. And I don't think that you can do much better than switching on your phone, your tablet, your laptop or your TV, however you choose to watch, getting over to Netflix right now and watching Clark.
Om jag inte kunde vara bäst på att vara bäst.
Är du redan klar?
Du har med ett proffs att göra.
Helvete! Skulle jag fan med vara bäst på att vara sämst.
This is Sir Robert!
In an age where every other person on our screen seems to be a celebrity chef, the origin story of a 1960s chef selling French cuisine in America doesn't necessarily sound like a compelling one. Well, that's until you've seen Julia.
My guest this afternoon writes cookbooks. Maybe we'll rename our little program What My Wife's Been Reading. Welcome, Julia Child.
What a lovely introduction.
This is the story of Julia Child, a author, a cooking instructor and a television presenter who would have a huge impact on the American culinary market and would leave a huge legacy in American popular culture through her cookbooks, but also through her television series. And this is the story of how her first television series got onto air, The French Chef. We join Julia and she's in her 50s. She's already become quite well known for her book, Mastering the Art of French Cuisine. That's been a hit, but when she goes to the doctors and is told that she's going through the menopause, she begins to think about what comes next. What will her legacy be? And ultimately, that is when she starts to think about other outlets for her work, and over time, we see her end up on the television in a local station in Boston.
You look lovely this morning.
Not camera ready, as they say.
What are you going to talk about?
I guess the book. Before everyone forgets about it completely. At this stage of my life, I want to feel relevant.
And that's where the majority of the energy of this show is spent, in the creation of and then the making of this show, The French Chef, which turns out to be a groundbreaking piece of television that would not only make Julia Child a huge star across the whole of America, but it would lay the foundations for the many myriad cooking shows that we see today, because the techniques that we see on television today and the way that those shows are filmed were things that were being done in many ways for the first time on this show. And that is what we see play out on screen, at the same time as seeing a woman who at times is quite reluctant about fame and is quite modest and isn't quite sure what her place in this television world is, start to come alive before our eyes.
I've had a recurring thought that I'd like to propose to you. An educational cooking show, hosted by myself.
Feels flimsy to me. This is public television, for God's sake.
Shouldn't we go with someone with a more camera-friendly look and a less distinctive sound?
But this isn't just a show about people whisking eggs or filming each other making cakes. This is a program that has lots of deep layered relationships that work around both Julia and around the show and the politics of making television and the politics of fame itself. Notable characters include her husband Paul, who's played by David Hyde Pierce, who is a retired diplomat and is now an artist, and he's questioning whether or not he really is an artist, especially as he sees what is going on with Julia's life. You see her relationships with the people that she makes the show with, from the ambitious producers who are trying to make her a star and those who assist her in it and have done for a long time, to those who are perhaps jealous of what she does and are not sure why she is getting fame when perhaps their shows and their parts of that small business aren't always doing as well. At the heart of this is a show that is as warm and as comforting as the food that Julia is cooking on screen. It creates an atmosphere in a place in the 1960s that you want to go and you want to stay. It creates characters that you want to be around and people that you really care about and you care about the journeys of. At the centre of this is Sarah Lancashire's incredible performance as Julia Child. Now, many of you may know her from shows like Happy Valley, and this is a very different performance and shows just what strength and versatility she has as an actor. This is a really, really tremendous performance. It's not one where you feel that she is doing an impression of someone, which perhaps can happen sometimes in these kind of biopics inspired by true events. No, this is a character that she makes her own, a character that is strong but is also vulnerable in a show that is sweet and at times funny, but also incredibly, incredibly compelling. This is a show that has a great storyline. It's a show that has a fantastic cast, and it is a show that is produced beautifully. As you might expect for something from HBO, they leave all of the class on the screen for you to enjoy in a world that you want to be in. So if you want to watch it, go and watch it now. It's on HBO Max if you are in the US. If you're in the UK, go and watch it on Sky box sets, or you can watch it on Now. So off you go and watch it.
I hope you've had as much fun as I did. Bon appetit.
Which of these comes from the 90s, grunge or grime? Get the question right, or the cat gets it. You need your wits about you to survive Charlie Brooker's latest interactive TV show, Cat Burglar. For those of you who have memories that go all the way back to 2018, I know it's a long time ago. Do you remember when we didn't wear masks? You'll know that Charlie Brooker has made an interactive adventure for Netflix before. Bandersnatch was part of Black Mirror, which I don't need to tell you, but I'm going to anyway, is Charlie Brooker's science fiction anthology series. It was a live-action adventure which allowed you to choose the path of the main character who was living in a world in the 1980s of video game creation. If played correctly, and I'm not sure if there is a correct way, it took, about the length of a film to complete. But I don't want to get too bogged down in Bandersnatch, which was great because this is quite different. But the reason I brought it up is because it's interactive, and Cat Burglar is interactive, but in a different way. Okay, so what is Cat Burglar? Well, in its simplest form, it's a beautifully crafted cartoon that reminds you of the golden age of cartoons. Think Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera. This is a beautiful piece of television. And as if that's not enough, bolt onto it a quiz mechanic, a little bit like one of those quiz machines in a pub where you've got a timer going down and you have to answer questions quickly or else you lose a life. Put those together and basically you've got Cat Burglar. Sounds a bit weird, not sure about that. You're not sure about anything. And yes, it is a concept that is a little bit different, and you probably didn't wake up this morning, have a cup of coffee, stretch and think, right, I'll go and seek out a cartoon with a quiz mechanic built into it. But that's what is great about art. That's what's great about creativity. There are things being made that you didn't even know you wanted until they were made, and now it's here, and now you should go and enjoy Cat Burglar. The premise of the show is that you have to help Rowdy, the cat burglar, in his dastardly plan to steal all the loot. He needs to get past Peanut, who is the security guard. Your job is to help Rowdy on that journey. Now, Rowdy's no ordinary cat because most of them, as we know, have 9 lives. Rowdy only has 3 lives. So if you answer a question wrong, Rowdy loses a life. If Rowdy loses all 3 lives, that's the end of the game and you are going to have to start again.
Hey, you gotta click the correct answer, Sleepy.
This means you can't just sit on your hands whilst you're watching the show. I mean, for two reasons. One, they'd go numb, and secondly, you need to actually do something to keep the show running. Otherwise, it will end because you'll lose all your lives. I don't want to work for my TV. I mean, I'm already paying them. They should be paying me if I'm having to work. Oh, good, you again. Yes, it's fair to say that in a world where many of us entertainment consists of slowly scrolling our thumb up a screen whilst aimlessly consuming whatever content is thrown at us, there is a little bit of work involved in this TV show if you want it to continue running. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. We've all been there, haven't we? You're watching a show, you think, this is great, and the next thing you know, you just crept over onto Instagram, you're just scrolling through Twitter, you're just checking the email, you look up and you've missed 7 seasons. You can't do that with this. But actually, far beyond the interactive element of Cat Burglar, the thing that makes it great is just how beautiful the attention to detail is. It's funny, it's clever, and it's crafted in a way that really does take you back to those old cartoons. If you're a fan of cartoons, you're going to love the attention to detail. From the style of the animation, from the way that it's been put together, to the music in the background and the capers that happen on the screen, this is something that will bring joy to everyone who's ever grown up watching Looney Tunes or Hanna-Barbera or any of those cartoons from that time. This is something that will make you smile and also keep you watching because, as discussed, you have to get involved. Okay, so I don't want to labour a point. Why don't you go and try it? You can see what happens to Rowdy, and even if you end up not being able to answer any of the questions, you're going to enjoy a bit of a fun cartoon caper before you crash and burn. Cat Burglar is available to stream and play wherever you are on Netflix right now, so go and do it. Andy Warhol said everyone would be famous for 15 minutes. Well, you'll be pleased to know it's not going to take 15 minutes for me to tell you just how good this docuseries is.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action. Andy Warhol's greatest work of art is Andy Warhol. Andy was creating contemporary culture.
I am Warhol. No one's more famous in the 20th century than Andy Warhol. Andy.
But I don't think you'll ever figure Warhol out, and I hope no one ever does.
Andy Warhol had a profound effect on 20th century pop culture through his art, through his music, and through the things he said and did. And I'm sure that's why Ryan Murphy, he behind things like American Crime Story, jumped at the chance to make a docuseries about such an iconic figure. Produced by Murphy and directed by acclaimed filmmaker Andrew Rossi, these are a series of films that are designed to get you under the skin of Andy Warhol, to understand the artist and not just the art. We're all familiar with the pop art and the Campbell's Soup and Studio 54, but how much do we actually know about what made Andy Warhol tick? What he was as a man, what he was in private.
Was Andy out? Well, he was never in, so...
Using found footage and recreations, as well as interviews with people who knew Warhol intimately, as well as famous people whose lives have been influenced by Warhol and his works, at the centre of this series of films are the diaries of Andy Warhol. Now, for 20 years, between 1967 and 1987, Warhol would at 9 AM each day phone his friend Pat Hackett, and he would record everything that he said. These conversations began actually as a way of Warhol trying to record his expenses for taxation purposes, but actually as time went on and as we start to see, it actually became a way of Warhol letting out a lot of his inner feelings, talking about things he'd done, talking about things he felt, and actually revealing a lot of his inner self to Hackett. A couple of years after the death of Warhol in 1987, Hackett released these diaries as a book, and they remain at the centre of this whole story. Now, in most documentaries, you'd expect that the diary would be read aloud by an actor here and there to hold together the show and give some context. That's not quite the case here, because in fact those excerpts are read by Andy Warhol himself. Well, a version of him, an AI-generated version of Andy Warhol narrates this story, which is quite strange.
I'm just a freak. I wasn't very close to anyone. Although, I guess I wanted to be.
However, as Warhol had gone on record in his life saying, "I want to be a machine," perhaps this is a fittingly quirky way to deliver the narrative of the story. This is ultimately the story of a hugely creative force, and as with so many of the best and the greatest creatives in the world, this is also someone who was vulnerable, someone who was lonely, someone who at times found it very difficult to cope with all that was around them. Uncomfortable in his own skin, grappling to define and exhibit his sexuality, and not understanding his place in the world and in the environment with which he operates. This is the portrait of a man who is brilliant, but also flawed.
If you want to know anything about my work, look behind it, there's nothing there, is really just not true. Within the diaries, there are these clues that he did have these intimate relationships.
Andy was in love with Basquiat. I don't know if it was sexual, but there was a relationship there.
He broke every rule. He made you look at things in a completely different way, and that's what art is.
We hear from many famous faces in this documentary, from Jerry Hall, from Debbie Harry, from Rob Lowe, from people who have been influenced by Warhol, from people who have met him and have spent time with him. This is all interwoven around this eerie AI narration from a version of Warhol himself, which makes you feel very much like you are there with him in the room. There's also archive footage which shows you Warhol making his art, going about his business. This is a complex piece of documentary making that brings together lots of different factors, and it just works. It works brilliantly. If you're interested in Andy Warhol, his art and his legacy, this is a must-watch for you. If, however, you are just interested in the way that 20th century pop culture has changed things, how celebrity has become what it is today, then this is also something that you should watch, because Andy Warhol's legacy is one that is still with us, and this is a fascinating piece of filmmaking which highlights that and the man that was behind that legacy. It's a Western, but perhaps not as you know it. Emily Blunt leads the cast in this excellent new co-production between the BBC and Prime Video. Let's find out about the English.
I'll tell you a story. Mine's about revenge. Can't help but think yours is too.
I've lived here my whole life. I've seen hell, and I've made hell.
So long, Sergeant. Just you remember, in there you've been one of us, but out here, you're one of them. Not your fight. Don't pick it.
Okay, so what's this one all about? Well, it's the 1890s and we are in the Old West. We are introduced to Eli Whip, who is a Pawnee native who has fought with the US cavalry as they have taken land against Native Americans. Therefore, he is someone who's seen as being an enemy in many ways by many of the Native Americans who he fought against, but also still isn't trusted by many of the US forces who he has fought with. Now, he is on a mission to go and claim the land in Nebraska that he was promised for the fighting. However, he's been told, and it becomes clear quite quickly, that perhaps this isn't going to be as straightforward as he thought, and perhaps that isn't something that's going to be honoured. Also, along the way, there are many people who are suspicious of him and are going to try to do their best to stop him in his tracks.
It was like magic. Only this afternoon, you were tied up there. I was lying down over there. Both about to get killed, and yet here we are. And it's everyone else that's dead.
Enter Lady Cornelia Locke. Now, she has arrived from England to Kansas to try to find the man who she believes is responsible for the death of her son. Now, she stumbles upon the torture of Eli Whip by a Mr. Watts in this rural area of Kansas. Now, she tries to stop this, and for various reasons, we don't get into too much plot points here, she isn't able to. But eventually, her and Eli manage to escape from the situation. And suddenly, we have two people in the middle of nowhere who are both on missions, both of which seem quite improbable, with quite a lot of people against them and trying to stop them. And you got yourself a setup for an excellent story in a beautiful setting. This is a Western, but not perhaps as you might normally know it.
Someone killed my child, and now I'm gonna kill him. Will you help me?
Can you shoot?
I have to.
Oh, you'll have to.
What we see next is a beautifully crafted piece of television as two unlikely people with very different backgrounds, but also connected and intertwined stories, those of loss, of harrowing pasts, come together. They're held together by a need to try and survive, but also they are both on a journey to try and right wrongs. And along the way, they meet lots of people who remind them of many of those wrongs and remind us as an audience of many of the things that have gone on in the past and the price that people and peoples have paid.
Not quite the woman I expected.
You're everything I'd expect of a man.
Now, with a show that relies so much on two central characters and the relationship between them and their relationship with a world that often seems hostile around them, you need to have fantastic central performances, and that is something you do not need to worry about at all. Emily Blunt, I can report, is, as always, exceptional in this. This is a nuanced performance, one that brings depth and energy from different areas as she goes through the story.
There's just something about this country. I sometimes wonder if there's horror in us all.
Now, I think the most impressive performance in the show comes from Cheske Spencer, who plays Eli Whip, because there's very little dialogue from him compared to most of the other characters. This is a performance that relies on the way that he has presence on screen, the way that he looks, the way that he acts, and the relationships that he can build quietly with those people in the show. Now, you could easily be lost in such an expansive environment as the West, in a show that has so much depth to it without having lots of lines. But that isn't a problem at all for Cheske Spencer. He delivers a fantastic performance, a captivating performance on screen. Written and directed by Hugo Blick, this is a beautiful and well-crafted piece of television that is paced to perfection. It takes a lot of the Old West, the Western themes, and it takes them to a new place. And as a viewer, you go on a journey through a plot that has twists and turns, but at no point do you feel that you are lost in the story. If you're looking for a new drama that is visually arresting, that is brilliantly acted, and will make you think about a lot of things, and there's a lot of themes that are touched upon in this show, then the English is certainly something I think you should give a go. As is becoming much more common in the TV market these days, this one is a co-production, on this occasion, between the BBC in the UK and Prime Video, which means that it's available if you are in the UK, where I'm sitting right now, on BBC Two, which is the terrestrial channel you can watch it on, or you'll be able to watch it on BBC iPlayer if you are someone who prefers to stream. Now, I know there's a lot of Screen OD viewers who are out in the US, Australia, Canada, and lots of other places around the world. You're all very welcome. Hello, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do remember to subscribe. But if you are outside the UK, you should be able to watch the English right now on Prime Video, which is the new name for Amazon Prime Video, as it used to be called, which is Amazon's streaming service. If you haven't tried it before, it is available for a 30-day trial, and you can find a link in the description below to find out how to try out Prime Video and try out the English.